Erica from Crypto Soul, and welcome to the Erica Show. The Erica Show introduces builders and leaders in the blockchain space. 안녕하세요. 크리스토 에리카입니다. 에리카 쇼 오늘의 게스트는 초특급 스페셜로 비트코인 갓파더 같은 존재이신 안드레아스 안토노플러스님을 모셨습니다. 바로 이 분야에 관심 있으신 분들은 가장 처음 접하게 되는 제일 유명한 책인 Mastering Bitcoin이라는 책을 쓰신 분이십니다. So today we have a very, very special guest. I'm so excited. We learned from his books when learning about Bitcoin and entering in the blockchain space, and like myself, and he's a renowned speaker, educator, and author of Mastering Bitcoin, Mastering Ethereum, Internet of Money series, Andreas Antonopoulos. Hello, Andreas. It is an honor and a great pleasure to meet you in the internet.
안녕하세요. It's very nice to meet you too.
Oh my goodness.
That's it. That's all the words I know. I also know 감사합니다, but I'll just stop there.
You've done plenty. Thank you so much. And, you know, I'm sure most, like 99% knows you in the industry, but for a minuscule portion of viewers who do not know who you are, could you give us a short, brief intro of, you know, who you are and what you do in the space, what you're currently working on?
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do an introduction and for having me on the show. You know, when the price is booming and there's a lot of new people coming into the space, I don't assume that anybody knows who I am. In fact, I meet a lot of people who are coming in for the first time. And so I like to think of my job as being the welcoming party. So welcome. Yeah, I've been in Bitcoin since about the middle of 2012. I'm a computer scientist and a teacher by profession. And what I teach is about the technology and the social, political, philosophical, historical implications of Bitcoin and other open blockchains. I've written 5 books so far on this topic, 2 technical, 3 non-technical, and I'm currently writing my 6th book. And I do a lot of videos, which you can also find on my channel. So almost all of my work is available for free under an open license for people to enjoy and learn about this space.
Yes, thank you. We are very grateful for your generous videos and the content, and you can check them out on the YouTube channel, which I, you know, religiously look at every day mostly. But yeah, I mean, you're a huge proponent of an educator of Bitcoin. And why Bitcoin, right? Where do you see the power of Bitcoin? I think a lot of people are asking this question at the moment.
So I'm a geek at heart. I love technology. I grew up around computers. I got my first computer when I was 10 years old. I just became completely fascinated by that technology. And one of the things that drives me is that I see technology optimistically. I see technology as having promise, as helping humanity move forward, progress, and improve the lives of people. And when it comes to information technology, I think that's even more powerful. So when I was always interested in the use of cryptography for social issues and currencies, but then lots of attempts were made, and most of them failed until 2009. And then finally, Bitcoin came along. Now, I missed it in the beginning, but then when I finally read the white paper, I could see that this was going to be a very important technology. To me, money is a form of information, communication, like a language for communicating value. And so information technology applied to money makes perfect sense. I think money is a very important technology for humanity. It affects how we build societies. It affects international relationships. And I truly believe in an open global world, and an open, truly global form of money that isn't controlled by anyone is, I think, what humanity needs to move to the next step.
Yes, that's definitely a great intro, and that's how I felt. Well, I'm an international relations major, so I got to kind of think in a more grand way as well. And you know, recently, as you earlier mentioned, the Bitcoin price just shoot up, and it's actually currently going crazy right now. But you know, the scarcity of Bitcoin price, FOMO, as you kind of can put it, and thus the prices shoot up and the market adoption maybe accelerated, right? Is this what Satoshi intended in the beginning when structuring Bitcoin? And if so, like, is this going the right direction, do you think?
I think yes. If we read what Satoshi Nakamoto talked about, they did really emphasize this point that by reducing the supply every 4 years, that would create a series of adoption waves where people get really interested because of the price. The trick here is that people get interested because of the price, but then they stay because they start understanding how this technology can affect their lives and also how it can affect the world. So my focus isn't primarily on the price, but also I am also affected by the price. So when the price goes crazy like it does right now, there is a short window of time when a lot of new people come in and they all need explanation. They all have questions, and it's my opportunity to help new people understand this technology, protect them from dangerous mistakes and also scams, and help them find ways to apply it to their life that go beyond just the price. You know, and I really see this as a tool for social change more than anything else. See, Bitcoin is often the first thing people see is the investment. So they see Bitcoin as an investment, but Bitcoin isn't just an investment. Bitcoin is a system. It includes a currency that is used by many as an investment, a network that enables payments, a payment system. It includes applications that use Bitcoin. It's a protocol system that runs on the internet. It includes an industrial infrastructure called mining. So there's many different perspectives of Bitcoin. And very often people come in from one perspective only, and that's price. But my job is to say, okay, great, you found it. Now let me bring you over to this side. Oh, look, it's different from this side. And see that there's more to it. This isn't just a magical internet stock. This is a fundamental technology that is a re-implementation of one of humanity's most fundamental technologies, which is money. And people don't think of money as a technology, but it is. And Bitcoin is the next evolution of this fundamental technology.
Then can you please elaborate on how the technology is intricate of Bitcoin and how people can understand it in a simple way, maybe in the beginning?
So it's actually fairly difficult for people to understand a technology like money. And you know, there's this old story where there's two young fish swimming in the ocean, and an older fish comes by, and the older fish goes to the young fish, "How's the water today?" And then swims away. And the young fish turn to each other and go, "What's water?" Because when you're in it, you can't see it. And if you ask most people the simple question, "What's money?" they can't answer it. Money is a technology that is so ancient that it is invisible. It has become a fabric of society that most people don't understand how it works. They don't understand why it exists and what it does. And therefore, when you upgrade that technology, when you bring in a new form of that technology, the initial reaction is very, very skeptical because you're changing something very fundamental. It takes some time to adapt to these new ideas, and it's often very difficult to explain. Now, if we have it difficult to explain, imagine how difficult it was to explain to people who had gold coins as money that they could replace them with a piece of paper issued by a bank. Now, that was a difficult job. And of course, not a very good replacement. So when I try to explain technology of Bitcoin, I very often have to take one step back and start by explaining the technology of money. So the way I look at it is this. Money is a communications technology. It's a form of language, and it's used by people to communicate value. If you think of it that way, it's easier to understand why the money itself doesn't have value. Money is simply a way of getting value, buying something, a service, a product, something else. Just like the word banana doesn't taste sweet. The banana tastes sweet. The word banana is just a mechanism we use to symbolize the fruit. And the same thing applies to this. The symbol of one Bitcoin or $1 or any other currency doesn't have value in itself. It's only an agreement we have that this will be useful tomorrow. And so what this language allows us to do is it allows us to take value that we have, which we've produced through usually our labor, creativity, work, something like that, and then transport it through space, transport it through time, or transport it across to another person. So if I want to express value to someone else, I use money to do that because we have a societal agreement, if you like, that this thing is of value. And if I want to hold it and not spend it, but keep it, and I assume that 3 days from now, I can spend it and it will still have value. And that's transporting through time. And then I can also send it to someone who's very far away. And they will also recognize it as money. So these are the characteristics of money. And Bitcoin has all of these characteristics. It just does all of those things on the internet. If you think of money as a language, then obviously the internet needs a native language of money that is purely digital. And the problem is that nobody is in control of all of the internet to introduce such a thing. No one can say this will now be the money of the internet. And what you end up having is monies that work in some countries but not others on the internet. And Bitcoin breaks that because it creates an opportunity to say this is a universal money. This works everywhere. It doesn't matter which country you're in. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you have documents or not. This technology allows us to take money for not the first time, because we've had global money before. Gold was global money. But for the first time in the modern era, in the internet era, to make a truly global money.
Yes. Oh, wow. Thank you for the intro. I mean, Bitcoin is definitely has potential, and I think it will be the digital gold, as people say. And even I think 2020 has been a crazy, interesting year to the say the least. And further down the road, it will likely to bring down an economic crisis, breakdown of the financial system, and I don't know, it will change everything, I think. And how do you think Bitcoin will play a role in this situation further on?
Well, we could see how Bitcoin is already playing a role in countries where traditional financial systems are not doing very well. So what we see is where traditional financial systems don't do very well, people use Bitcoin as a way to protect their future, as a way to cross borders with value, as a way to escape a broken currency. They do that in dozens of countries around the world. Vietnam is a great example of that. There is a fairly significant number of users of the Bitcoin currency in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And we see that again in many other countries that have problematic currency, problematic governments, or both. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a bit more difficult to see how Bitcoin is useful today in countries where the local currency works quite well and the digital banking system is very efficient. And coming from Korea, I'm sure you've experienced that. Mm-hmm. In places like Korea, you have to explain this in a different way. In places like Korea, this isn't really a mechanism to escape the local currency or the local government. What it is, potentially, is an interesting investment. But where it gets even more interesting is in when you start using Bitcoin to do things that cannot be done with traditional banking and traditional currency. So things like micropayments and games, things like being able to move money more easily across borders. And the same thing applies more broadly when you go into and look at other open blockchains and you look at things like Ethereum, for example, where you have decentralized finance applications. Now, those are all applications you simply can't do with traditional money, pure native digital applications. And I think we're going to see, as the technology matures, a lot more of that.
Yes, in your previous talks, you talked about like the geopolitical battle of currencies, right? And I think like
Hmm.
it has been escalating recently, and then DCE seems to be inevitable, and the Western world is responding to it in various ways. Like, there's Facebook DM coming out, and there are many other things. And can you describe this a little bit further? And how do you think it will progress? It's a very interesting, yeah, it's a very interesting trend.
Well, one of the problems we have today with the global financial system is that because every money belongs to a central government, money is being used as a tool to attack other countries. And so whoever has strategically important money can use that as a powerful weapon against other countries. Now, the US dollar, obviously having a central role as a reserve currency, gets to enjoy an incredible amount of power. And of course, that power can lead to irresponsible use of the power. So over the past 30 or 40 years, the US has gradually increased its use of the currency as a geopolitical weapon, using it with sanctions, threatening countries to cut them off from the international settlements and international wire transfer systems, isolating areas, using it in trade wars, using it to control the price of oil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, that gives the US more power, but it also means that the more a system of money is used as a tool of politics or a tool of war or a tool of control or a tool of surveillance, the less useful it is as a tool of commerce and trade. I'm generally an optimist. I think that commerce and trade is the basis for global peace and prosperity. The more interconnected countries are, the more interconnected the globe is, the more trade and openness there is across borders, the more difficult it is for countries to go to war against each other. And so to me, I think if you end up with a currency that is used mostly for political control and war, then that makes it harder to use it for trade and commerce. Now, the beautiful thing about a currency like Bitcoin is nobody controls it, and it has no political goal. It's simply an open and neutral system. It doesn't belong to anyone, which means having a neutral standard means that if you use that standard, you're not creating an advantage for someone else. And you're not creating a disadvantage for yourself. So any country can use Bitcoin, and more importantly, any person living in any country can use Bitcoin without permission and without creating some kind of advantage or disadvantage in a political situation. It's simply a tool of trade. And that makes it a very powerful tool of trade because the other forms of money are gradually failing as tools of trade. And we're seeing this more and more and more. Now, there are already billions of people around the world who simply do not have access to the world economy, who are cut off, not because of something they did, maybe because of something their government did, but they probably didn't vote for that government, maybe because some geopolitical tension that has nothing to do with anything. But they pay the price, and that creates a world that is extremely unjust. So I like the fact that Bitcoin allows money to work purely as a language of communication, that all of the people on this planet can speak to each other without interference from anyone.
Yes, and as you mentioned, like the way that US is trying to maintain the currency power, I think it really shows in the current trends of what the government and the SEC is doing, trying to, I guess, like hinder the development of the technology in the US, I think. And so, yeah, I think it really shows. And China, I mean, it's very interesting, like how the political system, like China, I guess, like it's similar to Vietnam, but then I think it's a little different on how they are playing. How do you interpret that? Like, do you see that as like a counter, like trying to earn the power back from the US, like trying to earn the currency power, the CBDC?
It's an interesting it's an interesting set of games that are being played right now because, you know, countries that try to stop Bitcoin from existing in their country, ultimately they fail. What they do is they turn Bitcoin into simply a tool for the opposition. And then they have no influence or participation or any of the advantages of that. As I like to say, you can't take Bitcoin out of your country, but you can take your country's influence out of Bitcoin. And so in many cases, we see people saying, oh, maybe China's going to ban Bitcoin. But that wouldn't really make much sense. Strategically, Bitcoin is not only a technology game changer that China already has a significant advantage in, but it's also something that seems to annoy Americans at times and to influence their control over the reserve currency. So China seems to be much more interested in keeping an eye on it, but allowing it to develop and keeping a position of power strategically in that space. So that if it turns out to be a bigger problem for America, that's good for China. And I think all governments believe that if they wanted to, at any point in time, they could just shut it down. Don't tell them. They can't. And that game is already over. Because the thing isn't Bitcoin itself. Yeah, you can attack the people who do the mining, and you can attack the computers, and you can attack the network. What you can't attack is the idea. And the idea is a recipe. It's a mathematical recipe. And it can be recreated by anyone and strengthened based on information that is broadly available. You know, a teenager with access to this book spending a month could rebuild Bitcoin from scratch. And, you know, this book is available in 17 languages for free on the internet. So you can't really stop this information from getting out. This is why I think it's such a critical technology and invention.
Yes, it's an inevitable trend, and you know the current trend is really proving that. And you've mentioned many times, like I saw your recent video, and you mentioned that you know, the current banking system is like a Ponzi scheme, and I think a lot of Korean community were very intrigued by that your idea. And like, can you elaborate more on that? Like, if this were true, right? When do you expect people to realize this problem?
Well, I mean, the current banking system is like a Ponzi scheme in that commercial banks get to receive very low interest loans from the government that they can then use to multiply the amount of money that they have in their deposits and produce commercial loans that they lend out at higher interest rates that are many times more than the value of deposits they actually hold. So they're basically paying out these loans with money they don't have. And from that perspective, you know, this is a system that has allowed enormous growth, but it also creates a fundamental imbalance. And that imbalance is that if you are someone who has a license to be on the front of the production engine of money itself, and the price at which you receive money is very, very cheap, but the price at which you lend money out is more expensive, that is a license to make money. That is a license that gives you the ability to make enormous amounts of money with very little risk. And as we've seen again and again and again, anytime there's a systemic risk, you're also first in line to get a bailout, stimulus, some kind of subsidy or protection from market forces, which means that effectively you get to keep all of the profits, and then if there's any risk, you just pass it to the taxpayers. And we saw that happen again with COVID now. We saw it with the real estate crisis. We saw it with the Asian crisis. We saw it every single time. So this creates a very, very corrupt system, and it also creates a system that breeds economic inequality. The people who are the closest to the main pipe where money is poured into the economy get to drink the most of that money out of the pipe. And so that means that the difference between those who are closest and how rich they get and the rest of the population just gets wider and wider and wider and wider. In economics, this is called the Cantillon effect. The idea that proximity to power and money creates more power and money. So this is dangerous for democratic ideals. It means that under these circumstances, democracy gets very fragile because it no longer matters whether your population really likes what you're doing or not, if you can simply buy yourself an election. So the corrupting influence of money and the corrupting influence of the current banking structure threatens many different aspects of society. And it's a system that ultimately doesn't prevent crisis. Here's another thing. A lot of the time people will say, well, you know, Bitcoin is fixed supply. So what happens if there's a massive crisis? The government can't just create stimulus and save the population. Well, when's the last time the government did create stimulus and save the population? I mean, the government does create stimulus, but who is it saving? Who is it saving? You know, look at what just happened in America. Look at what has happened during the housing crisis or the Asian capital crisis. The government creates stimulus. The stimulus goes to the banks. The banks get even more rich than they were before. And then a tiny amount goes down into the savers, but then gets taken back because inflation has increased. Then the government ends up in too much debt. So what do? They raise taxes, they raise sales taxes, they decrease social benefits. So they end up taking even that small amount that ended up in the middle class back. And now the middle class is worse off than it was before the crisis began, and the bankers are richer. So who did you end up helping? So if you're telling me that we can't do that with Bitcoin, or we can't do that with fixed supply currencies, I'm like, good. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that.
Mm-hmm. It's a vicious cycle for sure. And I think history repeats itself, and we definitely need a change. Oh, wow. Yeah, this political, international relations aspect is very intriguing to me. And, you know, let's kind of move on to technology now. And, you know, you've seen a lot of latest developments in, you know, the Bitcoin space, but like, and you talked about Lightning Network as well. And can you elaborate more on like what you think is the most, I guess, intriguing latest development that you see and why you think so? Can you share that with us?
Well, I'm currently writing my 6th book on the Lightning Network. It's called Mastering the Lightning Network, and it's going to be a college-level scientific textbook about the Lightning Network. I'm writing it with Lalo Stockton and Renee Picard, who are both just incredibly influential and brilliant people in the Lightning Network space. And we've already delivered the first 5 chapters, and as with the previous books I've written, it's written open source online. You can actually watch us write it every day. So Lightning Network is, to me, a very fundamental technology. It takes the same security guarantees and monetary policy of Bitcoin, but it enables us to effectively use it in a way that is much more fast, much more private, and in much smaller amounts. So today with Bitcoin, we have this fantastic technology. It allows us to send money anywhere in the world. But when it gets very, very busy, it might cost $1, maybe even $2 to send a transaction, sometimes even more. And so you're not going to make a $2 payment with Bitcoin because you're going to spend $2 on fees. So that doesn't make any sense. Now, if you want to send $100 or $2,000, then it's very competitive with wire transfers, bank transfers, and things like that. It's very, very fast. You can get it completely cleared and final within 6 blocks, 1 hour, anywhere in the world. It's a very, very powerful international payment system. But if I wanted to buy a pack of gum at my local convenience store, then it doesn't scale because the security guarantees of Bitcoin require everybody to validate every transaction. Now, with the Lightning Network, I can make a payment as small as maybe 1/1000th of a penny, which is a very, very small amount, and make that payment and have it completely finalized within less than a second. Again, anywhere in the world, online only. And the best part, nobody can see that that payment happened except from the two participants. So it is much more private than Bitcoin. So these are very significant improvements, because then we can start thinking of Bitcoin as serving both the extremely robust digital gold, very secure, nation-state resistant international money, and the buy something tiny, very, very, very fast, modern digital money that is very flexible. You can now see applications like gaming and microtransactions that are possible. You can start rethinking how you do different applications. For example, let's say we're selling streaming video. Well, rather than, I don't know, paying $8 upfront to watch a video, first of all, I could, if I wanted to, charge just 50 cents, and I wouldn't have the credit card companies take half of that money. But then instead of having someone pay 50 cents in advance, what I could do is I could have them pay 1 penny a minute. And over 50 minutes, pay me 50 cents. So as I'm streaming video to them, they're streaming money back to me. Now, when you start thinking of these concepts, streaming money, two words that you never heard before put together, but which creates a completely new technological foundation. And that's where it really gets interesting, because now that's the kind of application that I can invite a Korean and say, hey, look what we just did with money. That's never happened before.
Right. We can buy, I think the problem these days is we cannot really buy small things, and it's, yeah, the price is volatile as well. So it's very difficult to purchase something really small. And that's what's happening. And I think a lot of Koreans and a lot of the Asian communities, I think they're kind of questioning this aspect. But if this, you know, once your book is out, I think people are very intrigued to read more about it. And
yeah, and the Lightning Network is something that you can use today. You can download the Lightning wallet today, start using it. It works really well. People come and buy stuff off my shop all the time. In fact, I have a book available for $2. And the book is also available for free, but the only reason I put it on the shop is so that people have something to buy that they would not normally buy with Bitcoin, because who's going to make a $2 payment, right? And with Lightning, it's something that you can easily demonstrate and do very, very easily. And every now and then someone will come to my website and they'll give me a donation using the Lightning Network of 1 Satoshi. Now, 1 Satoshi, for your viewers who don't know, is 100th millionth of a Bitcoin. So 1 Bitcoin has 100 million Satoshis. 1 Satoshi today is about is 1/20,000th of a penny. And so it's a ridiculously small amount. It's not actually going to do anything. But they can actually do it and demonstrate that it's done.
Oh. Check out the website and see if we can really make the payment. That's a really good, you know, showcase of what you can actually do. And you also wrote about Ethereum a lot, and you know that's also out as well. And you know, Ethereum 2.0 has been making a lot of good noise lately. And what are your general thoughts on the recent development? You know, DeFi has been building so heavily surrounded by, you know, the Ethereum ecosystem. So what are your general thoughts on this recent trend and, you know, developments in that field?
You know, I think a lot of people misunderstand what Ethereum is trying to do and how it's developing. As someone who has been involved in programming for many years, I see something really special in a blockchain that is truly programmable at a very, very fine level. And there's two very interesting things here. One is the fact that you can construct a smart contract, a small program that handles money in ways that haven't been done before. And I think that's the first and obvious part. But what's not so obvious is that when you have 10 or 20 of these little small programs that do something interesting, you can come along and essentially glue them together like Lego and make something much more complex. Now they call that compositing, code modularity, the Lego of money. You can call it whatever you want. And it's important to understand that this is not something that today is producing the kind of results that are necessarily always good. In order to have something like that really be successful, you need each and every one of those Lego pieces to work predictably and consistently and effectively and not have any bugs. And that's difficult to do because Ethereum is a system that moves very fast, and as a result, it has problems. But if you see where this is going and you start paying attention to the moves that are happening, what you see is that over time, these simple components are getting more and more robust. And once you have 5 basic Lego blocks that are really, really strong and robust, now you can combine those and build something that has never been built before that itself is quite robust. And then maybe in 5 years, instead of 5 basic components, you have 20 basic components, and the number of ways you can combine these becomes even greater. So to me, that's the magic. Of course, in order to do that, Ethereum needs to have better scale. It needs to improve its security and auditing. It needs a lot because it has a long way to go. But I can look at what it is today and say that's not very secure, and some of this stuff isn't very interesting. Some of it's complete garbage and scams, of course. But I can also see, okay, but these 3 pieces are actually very serious and very well designed. And if I took these 3 and then next year took another 3, I can see where that path leads. I can see how that builds into a future that is very, very exciting. I think a lot of this is being able to see an imperfect today and see how through just incremental and gradual improvement, you get to an evolution of something that is much, much more powerful in the future. And for me, as someone who's been studying technology and working in technology for 3 decades now, that's what I see in technology. You show me something that is rough and basic and has problems, I look at it and I see, well, this has a certain elegance. And now I see, okay, this is where it might go next. And then it goes there. And I can see how that unfolds. I had this first experience when I got my first computer at 10 years old. It was very basic, right? You connected it to your TV. You had to write the programs yourself in a programming language. I had to learn it. But, you know, it had 16 colors. You know, it wasn't that spectacular. It wasn't. But I saw the promise, right? And it blew my mind. My mind immediately went, okay, and this is where it is in 5 years. And that blew my mind. So I've had that experience with a series of technologies. And I had it with Bitcoin. And then I had it again with Ethereum. And I'm sure I'm going to have it, and then again with the Lightning Network. And I'm going to have this again and again and again. The only difference is this. When I was 10 years old, and I went to everybody in my family, and I went, oh my God, this computer thing is going to be the best thing ever. You have no idea. It's so big and complex. I was trying to explain to them what I saw in my mind. Everybody would say, go and clean your room, and laugh at me, right? There's not much difference in how I see things on the inside, but there is a big difference in how well I can express that message and the confidence I can put behind it. Now, I've seen this happen 8 times. And this time, it doesn't matter if you tell me to go clean my room, or if you laugh at me, or if you think I'm crazy, or if you think I'm saying things that are not going to happen. Because I've seen them, and they did happen. And after they happened again and again and again and again, I now have the confidence to say, you know, just wait and see. You'll see.
Yes, thank you. I think that people who are seriously building in this space are looking at the future, and I think looking at the potential, and looking at the prototype, I guess. It's not perfect yet, right, but I think it's definitely improving. And, you know, the blockchain space is definitely still nascent. What do you think needs the most improvement from your current view? Like you've seen a lot, I think, during the past, I guess, 10 years, is it? I mean, yes. Many years. And what do you think needs improvement in terms of, I don't know, technology or any other aspect, in your own opinion?
I think we have a lot of areas where we need to improve. User interface design, user experience, making things easier, user security. And the two are very close together. You can't separate user interface design from security. A user interface has to make the user do the secure thing without them even noticing, and make it difficult for them to do the insecure thing. That has to come naturally with a good user interface. We're not there yet. Today, it takes a lot of effort to learn. It's almost like a new language. And you can make a lot of very basic mistakes where you think you're saying one thing, but you're actually doing something else, and then you get yourself into trouble. It takes time for that to mature. And that's a process that happens from two ends. One is we make the user interface and experience better. The other is we train and educate a whole generation in a new language, and the two meet together. I was involved in the internet in 1989 for the very first time. There were fewer than 150,000 people on the internet at the time when I got my first access. I immediately saw where this was going. I just had one of those moments. And it was impossible to use. So what changed between then and Steve Jobs launching the iPhone and the iPad? Well, two things changed. One, the technology got so much better and easier to use. But the other thing that changed is we taught 2-3 generations now how to say strange new words like email and web and Google, and how to think in strange new ways, like being able to communicate instantly with anyone, anywhere. Or that if you take a photo and you put it on the internet, it will never go away. The good and the bad. So those are basically 3 generations learning a language and coming closer, and a user interface coming to meet them until you have a technology that's really mature. We're pretty far from that. But we are moving in the right direction. So I think user interface and security are the two most important things. In the case of Bitcoin and Ethereum, I would also say that privacy is extremely important. Today, we are not yet in a situation where the currency wars and the government attention is such that they are going to actively try to punish people for using Bitcoin. But in some countries, that's already happening. And we need to make sure that we have strong privacy so that we can protect ourselves if that happens more broadly, because it will. It will.
Yes, definitely. I agree. And, you know, we've heard a lot of great content from you, but before you go, can you, share a last message to the Asian community, maybe Korean, Vietnamese? Any last words of, your wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, for the past 5 years, I've been almost a full-time nomad, traveling continuously all around the world. I've spent, out of those 5 years, I spent probably 2 years cumulatively in Southeast and East Asia, in Korea and Vietnam and Malaysia, in Indonesia, in many different countries. And currently, I can't travel. But I promise you this, I'm still a nomad. I'm simply a nomad who's currently trapped in one place. My spirit hasn't changed. So I can't wait, but I hope sometime in the next 6 months, maybe 12 months, I'll be able to get vaccinated, get on a plane, and come back to Korea, come back to Vietnam, and once again, go and visit people around the world to listen to their stories about why this technology is so important.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to invite you to either of those countries. And, thank you so much for your precious time. And I look forward to seeing you in person sometime very soon.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.